So I'm going to show you how you can go about rendering individual frames as well as rendering out your network so that you can re-import it. And the reason for this is that a lot of us like to use SWFs, but by rendering or exporting it as an SWF file, we lose a lot of the different effects that we add to our work. For instance, glows and blurs will not show up in an SWF. So if I go ahead and just do an SWF render of that shot right there, or actually the whole scene, but you'll see what you're seeing here in this image will not be the way that it looks in SWF. And it's going to take a second because my computer is just not that cool. Okay, so it's making me out to be somewhat of a liar, but one thing you'll notice here is the flames that are coming up, they look like just blobs. They don't really have their glow effect on them. And I'll show you the difference between, say, let's look at this frame 7 here and frame 7 here. Yep, render time. Yep. Okay, so there's frame 7 inside of Toon Boom, and there's frame 7 as a SWF render. So the way that you can get around that and export as an SWF is you come in here to write, and this is in the network view on Toon Boom Animate Pro 2. Toggle that. This is asking you where would you like to render your frames to. So we're going to render it to the frames folder inside of our project folder. What is the file name going to be? Test. So each frame will start with test, and then they'll have leading zeros. So this is asking you here, what frame would you like to start on? We'll just leave that at 1 for the time being. And then these are the leading zeros. So each frame, if we render 5 frames, there'll be test frame 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5, or 0, 0, 0, 1. Depends on your preference. In this case, we'll just leave it 1. And we're going to render out JPEG, just because it's a smaller file size. But you have a huge selection of what you can work with here. Close that down, go up to your file, export, render network, and just for the sake of saving time, since my computer is so cool, I'm only going to render 2 frames, from frame 1 to frame 2, and say OK. Now when it renders it out, we'll see that the frame will actually have, or the frames will actually have their glow and any effects that I've added to them. So we'll jump over here to my project file, 22, in frames, and there are the 2 frames that I just rendered out. Okay, and there you can see that it's got the proper glow on it, as opposed to this one that's muddy and missing a lot of stuff. So what we can do now is, just for the sake of making this really quick, I'm just going to render out 10 frames, delete these, and render out 10 more frames, and then re-import that and show you the animation. Let's see here. I'll show you the difference between rendering your network view and re-importing that, and then rendering that as an SWF, as opposed to just rendering an SWF by itself. So here we'll do these 10 frames. Might want to go get something to drink while this renders, because it does take a while. Or I could just keep talking or humming. No, I won't do that. So 3 more frames to go. And the reason that we can't export as an SWF is because SWF files can't read bitmap effects, such as blurs and glows, and I don't know, there's probably a myriad of other things in this modular library that it can't that it won't render out. So I'm going to go over here to my Finder. Here's my 10 frames that I just rendered out, and I'm going to re-import those into Toon Boom. I'll just create another layer here, and I'll import those into that layer. I click the import icon here, and you know, all my 10 frames are already coming up here. So go ahead and open that. We don't want to vectorize it. We'll just add it to the layer here. And just import it straight. Say OK. Alright. Here are my 10 frames. Let me scoot those back to frame 1. And we'll just make this the only layer we can see. Alright, yep. Okay, we can go back to our OpenGL view because it's already been rendered, so we don't need to see it in rendering view. And there it is, with the glow and such on it already. And then we would just export this again as an SWF. And I'll just put that on my desktop here. And make sure that you specify the frames so you don't go rendering a bunch of stuff that you don't need to. In my case, that would take forever. Okay, now there's that, and I'm going to show you the difference between having done it like that and exporting a just an SWF by itself. So we'll call this test 2. Okay. Then I'll go ahead and minimize that, close that, close that. Alright, so here's test 1. Here's the one that we re-imported the network rendered frames. And as crappy as it may be, because it's only 10 frames at 30 frames per second, you can see that it still maintained its glow and blurs and such. Okay? So now, god damn it, here's the regular SWF render. Don't ask me why it's going so slow, but you can clearly see that it's missing a bunch of the elements or a bunch of the effects. My computer's like in overdrive right now. So that is how you render your network view and how you can use those frames to render a SWF file once again with all the effects that you've added. Hope this was helpful.